Hi, Gary. Thank you for joining.
Hi, it's Brenda Manthai.
I'm sorry, who's on the line?
Brenda Manthai.
Hi, Brenda. Thank you for joining us today. I noticed you had accepted the invitation, so I appreciate you coming in. What UHIP or organization do you represent?
Native Americans for Community Action out of Flagstaff, Arizona.
Thank you. And we're all grateful and happy that you're able to join us on today's community learning. And thank you for introducing yourself. Does anyone else like to share who's on the line? Just who you are and what organization you're from, even if it's like a text message through the message box at the bottom, the chat box. Okay, so to not hold up anyone else, I would like to thank you all for joining. Welcome to the Behavioral Health Community Learning series on best practices for grant writing. To give everyone a brief recap of our last community learning, we discussed best practices on understanding key components of a project narrative and being able to gain a better understanding on how to appropriately create a project narrative checklist, which can help in adapting future grant writing needs. Before we go on to our presentation today, I would just like to share with everyone a little bit about what the Technical Assistance Research Center at NCUIH does and what type of services we provide to our member organizations and organizations who need support. So we provide support in four levels. If anyone who's on the line can mute while I'm talking, it would be nice because there's a lot of backdrop noise, possibly. If anyone who's on the phone could mute their call. Sorry, I should have shared that information with you ahead of time. As I was mentioning, there's 4 levels of services that we provide through the Technical Assistance and Research Center, and for those 4, those being information dissemination, so giving out best practice tools and different best information and publications that support capacity building for your health centers, urban Indian health centers and organizations. We also provide trainings through webinars, community learnings such as the one we're doing today, and also in-person one-on-one technical assistance support that entails various avenues of support. So we could do one-on-one or get you to a person that can provide you even further support based on your needs. And then our last level of services that we provide to our members is just research and evaluation. We do a lot of different program evaluations, community readiness assessments, and avenues of that sort to really help build out your community and to see what kind of gaps exist and how to move forward and improve on those gaps. So it's a little bit about TARC. Before I go ahead and to give some information on our presenter today, I want everyone to know that today's community learning is a way for all of us to kind of share with one another our experiences and feedback, so then we could learn and grow from one another as the topic of grant writing fundamentals is going to be further discussed. And the process that entails is sharing some of your most important best practices and things that or challenges that you might face in your organization when it comes to preparing for a budget for a grant. So just a little background on what community learnings are. So it's really a little more informal way, and just it gives that space for dialogue to happen more than in contrast to a webinar. And as I mentioned today, I haven't mentioned, but today's topic will be on grant budget preparation fundamentals. And I will guess that many of you know or have possibly utilized tools in preparing the budget for a grant, but really it's significant to understand the essential components needed to prepare a budget and the steps to take to successfully apply to a budget to a grant application, whether that being a suicide prevention program on a college campus or implementing integrative care at a residential treatment program. There should always be a well-developed budget, and without one, or at least a well-written one, your proposal will more likely fail to meet passing grading standards. So it's important to have these tools, and today's community learning provides that opportunity to really garner that support you need, and just to take knowledge back to your own individual respective communities and organizations to grow. So one last information I want to share before I introduce the presenter. I will be sending out an invitation to all of you today on a future community of learning that we're going to have on medical assisted treatment best practices that will happen on Wednesday, April 3rd. From 2 to 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you know of anyone of your colleagues or new staff in your organization that may benefit from our next community learning, please forward the calendar invite that I'm going to send to all of you. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce our presenter, Alejandro Bermudez Villadar. Mr. Bermudez is the Director of Programs and Development at NICUIH and has more than 15 years of experience working both domestically and internationally, managing programs from national and international donors. Mr. Bermudez assists the Executive Director at NICUIH in the development of programmatic work, initiatives, budgeting, and full grant management cycles. Previously, Mr. Bermudez had managerial roles in programs working in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. Through his career, Mr. Bermudez had the opportunity to collaborate in projects that directly and indirectly benefited underserved populations in developing countries. From education to health access are just some of the ways that he did this. He has a master's degree in communication and culture technology from Georgetown University. He's also earned his honors certificate in international business diplomacy and is currently pursuing his PhD in public health. And so without any further ado, just will pass it on to you, Alejandro.
Thank you very much, Sabu. Can you guys hear me? Just say yes. Hello?
Yes, they can hear you. There's a...
Oh, okay, perfect. Thank you very much. So thank you very much, Sabu. My name is Alejandro Bermudez. As Sabu just mentioned, I'm Programs and Development Director here at NICUIH. And so I am going to be presenting budget preparation fundamentals. So, Sabu, would you please go to the next slide?
Okay, got it.
Thank you. Great. Thank you very much. So, I've been working with different programs, and one thing that I have realized is that, when we have new staff or people who just starting to get into the programmatic work, they are thrown a budget and they are asked to develop something. And so what I've realized, sometimes people are nurses, medical practitioners, psychologists, and, they are very good at what they do, but they do not have a good experience on doing budget. And I just want to share that that's what happened to me. You know, I started as a program assistant and I didn't know how to develop a budget. So from there, you know, I tried to understand better. And what I'm going to be sharing with you guys today are the tools that I've developed for myself and the rationale that I have found into doing budgets when you're working in order to get a grant from federal sources. So before I continue, I would like to just acknowledge I do have an accent in English, so and I do not get offended if someone says like, "Can you please repeat?" or you know, it's something that was not very clear. I am more than happy to repeat myself, and I don't have any problem. So as I mentioned, the goal is to provide the essential tools for federal grants budget preparation. I would expect these to have mostly programmatic staff, admin staff, but sometimes there are some people who are senior managers or, you know, leaders of their organizations that would like to have a refresher. So this essential budget preparation chat is for all of us. So the topics that we're going to be looking at today are budget as a project design foundation, cost principles, allowable costs, indirect costs, detailed budget category explanations. So that is more or less what we're going to be looking at. Something that I thought is that if we work together on a fictional RFA and create a budget, I think that would be the best way in which I would be able to share what I have learned, and probably will give you the tools that you know, that I have learned through my experience. There are some we're going to go through some understanding of, you know, why the reasons a budget is structured in a way, provides real basics about budgeting rather than just giving you information that you can find on the web. Most of the budget preparation webinars that you will find will provide you with, you know, cost principles from the Office of Management and Budget, and, you know, very dry. And so what I tried today is to give you a little bit more. So if we can go to the next slide, please, Sebu. Okay, so these are, I would say it's an agenda or the sections that we're gonna cover. We have these topics. The truth is that these topics interact with each other when you are developing a budget. So some of them are gonna be intertwined. We're gonna see, you know, what are the preparation steps, the overall strategy. That is, I would say, in my case, what I've learned is that you have to set yourself into the grant reviewer mindset. You know, what they are thinking so that you can actually produce that, because you're going to be responding to something that they have put out there. You know, setting the limits or planning. Something that is very important is to make sure that your budget is aligned with all grant components. I've realized through the work that I've done that most of the programmatic people in the beginning think that the budget is something that is attached to a narrative and that the narrative is going to be the one that is successful. But for, you know, in the grant reviewer's mind, budget has to be perfectly aligned with the narrative, and it has to make sense as if it was part of the narrative. So I think I'm going to provide you with some elements that would probably help you understand better how to accomplish that alignment. We're also going to be looking at putting the information into their format because they have a specific format that we have to follow, and we're going to look at it. Intertwined into these sections or agenda, we're going to check for some basic rules, structure the cost, and check for specific rules. So before we go on, I would like to ask if there is any questions so far. Okay, thank you very much. Next one, please. Okay, so as I mentioned, I would like to, you know, since the beginning to start with a practical example so that, you know, you all know that we're going to be looking at that. So this is a fictional RFA, you know, it is coming from the Indian Health Service. It is a request for application, an RFA, in relation to a new legislation that just came out, also fictional, legislation HIV-123, 2019, and that is referring to the use of opioids to treat HIV behavioral health for community health representatives. So they just issued this legislation, and then there are some ways in which you have to operationalize this legislation, and that deals directly with CHRs or community health representatives. So this is in the hopes of making it useful. So can you go to next, please, Sebu? This is going to be the request for application background or RFA background. So the situation right now is that the HIV/AIDS is becoming widespread again after 30 years. And this is due to people of all ages, being less afraid of HIV, but mainly youth because, they grew in a world in which there is probably no cure for HIV/AIDS, but it is no longer a death sentence. So HIV has become a chronic treatable disease. And, there is the use of PrEP or Truvada, which, prevents getting infected from HIV. So the proposed period that this RFA has is 18 months. That's 1 year and a half. The total available that you will see in the RFA, usually it refers to the total amount that the agency has put out there for all of the grants. That would be $5 million. And then there are a number of expected grants that would be 10. The ceiling would be 500,000, meaning that would be, the maximum that you can request for a grant. The floor, which is the minimum that you could request for the grant, would be $100,000. Again, this RFA is fictional, and then I thought it would be interesting if we start this way. Next one, please. So you have the RFA, you have the fundamentals. So what to do next? So you gather your team and you say, okay, so what are we going to do, right? So, let's say that we came up with the idea as a team to do a training for Native Americans, CHRs, and other CHRs that are also serving Native Americans on the practical implementation of the regulation to help eradicate HIV/AIDS pandemic in your community. So, we come up with this idea of doing a training. We're just developing it, and then we'll make a ballpark decision. Let's go for our budget. I don't think that, with the activities that we're planning, we'll be able to go for the 500,000. But, I think that with all of our ideas, we may get to 370,000. So it will be just a ballpark idea. The timeline would be, we will be going for the 18 months, and that's 1.4 years because that's what they are asking for. Okay, great. So we have the idea, and then we have the limit. So what do we do next? What is our overall strategy? So next, please. So the overall strategy that I would suggest is that, as I mentioned, set yourself in the grant reviewer's mindset. What is the rationale? How do we get there, right? And here I'm not only talking about the budget, I'm talking about the whole program, and the budget being a very important component of it. So since it has to be aligned, then we have to, think about, the program as a whole. So we have to think about how government officials speak, plan, action, they have their mindset. I would like to take this opportunity actually to share with you something that I've learned, and that I would call it the transferring the responsibility cycle. And that is, I'm briefly going to explain to you why the RFAs are the way they are and why the budget has to be compliant the way it has to be. So I call it the transferring responsibility cycle because let's say that we have that issue, which is the HIV/AIDS is increasing again. So it comes to Congress, and then from it comes to Congress, and they realize there is an awareness about this, that something needs to happen. The Congress decides to create this law. The law goes to the agency goes to grantees or contractors, and that is going to affect the patients. And then again, there are going to be some results from that issue that has been taken care of, and then it goes back to Congress. In my experience, it is of paramount importance to find a logic on what you do, especially for such a dry, and for some people, budgeting is very tedious. So, if we understand, where all requirements come from, we'll provide you with a general idea of the rationale behind what and why they require the cost expressed in that way. So let's just take a look or a moment just to see exactly what I mean with this transferring responsibility cycle. Next one, please. Okay, the transferring responsibility cycle, and this is something that I coined, and I want to share with you. So this is how the RFA is structured. The Congress has a response to the popular demand of, increasing of, HIV/AIDS, and then they create a law and mandate to executive. All of that mandate is put into a specific set of regulations that the agencies have to follow. The blue square is the requirement for Congress to the agency how you are supposed to do things. That's the way they say it. Then we have, the executive, which is the agency, has the mandate to do implementation to the agencies. So what do? The executive provides, these mandate to agencies. The pertinent agency, which would be, in this case, Department of Health Services, and then under them, IHS, to interpret the law or the policy, right? And that would be the orange circle. Then, the government has to make sure that all of the regulations that they do are good and consistent across all of the government. That is the triangle, the green triangle. Then when it goes to the grants management unit, in this case for us, it would be the Urban and Health Programs Unit or the Behavioral Health Department. Then the project officer has to comply with a set of rules. That will be the yellow rhomboid or that image there, the yellow. So when they are structuring your RFA for HIV/AIDS, they are asking you, show your idea fulfills both your needs and my needs, and I will get you the funds. In the end, you have that thing that looks like a flag or, like a mystic symbol or something. That is your RFA. And yes, our homework and what we have to do is basically make sure that all of them are complying with their work. Why? Because they have set up the rules and we're applying for them to provide them with the funds. So we have to comply with the whole RFA spectrum. So it looks like daunting and, like a lot of things, but in reality, it is very formulaic once you understand the way they think. So, so far, I know that this is a lot of information and I'm going too broad. So I just want to make sure that I haven't lost you. So if you have any questions, I'm just going to stop for a little bit. Okay, very good. Thank you. So next, please, Cebu. So usually in a webinar or in a training for a budget preparation and structuring, this is what they are going to give you. They are not going to give you a lot. They are going to explain to you what the OMB, that is the Office of Management and Budget Super Circular 2014, the last one, is, and how that is going to apply to your grant and how you have to develop the budget under that. What does that include? And these that we have here, this square, basically is, it's all the regulations all the way from Congress to how the grants management unit is going to put all of them. Your grant has to comply with all of them. It has three main components: the administrative, the admin requirements. Those are for the organization, and so it is how they have to comply with being a nonprofit. So that would not apply to you as somebody who is preparing a budget if you're just an admin staff or a programmatic staff, because that goes into a large organization. But I wanted you to be aware that there are some administrative requirements there. And then the cost principles, that refers to your project, what is allowable, what is allocable, and what is reasonable. That is something that we're going to look at. And that is what, it is most important to understand in terms of, doing a project and actually implementing it. And we're going to go through those. And then there is an audit. They want to make sure that you're complying with everything that they have requested you to do. Why? Because these are government funds. And if something goes wrong, then, the agency will be to blame, and then the agency will go to executive, and then somebody can tell Congress that the agency is not doing well. So they want to make sure that you're complying with everything. So that's more or less, and this is not just because I'm saying, it's just what I show you of the transferring the responsibility cycle. Since they are managing federal funds, they want to make sure that everything that you do is compliant with all of the flags that we saw before, the square, the circle, the triangle, everything else. Thank you. Next one, please. So just because, we're discussing the budget, and I would like to provide you with the sources for the three of the elements that I provided you before, the admin requirements, the cost principles, and the audit requirements. They are extensive, they are very dry, and, as a program manager or as an ED or as somebody who's working in a nonprofit, you will have to go through a training specifically on this. I wanted to just provide you with the sources in case you would really like to take a look at all of them. For the purposes of this webinar, I'm going to intertwine some of them while we're working on the budget and on the explanation. So I just wanted to provide you with that. Next one, please. Okay, so let's go back to what we were doing. So how to get into the government agency mindset when it comes to grants and budget. You have to, sometimes when you start writing grants and, you're a junior program officer assistant, you tend to think, or I would tend to think when I was younger, that, the most innovative and, the idea that is going to be capturing their ideas and that is going to give you an edge. And it may actually, but in reality, the first thing that they are going to be looking at is that you comply with everything. So they will not look at your ideas or innovations if you're not complying with everything. So how to get onto the mind? It is rather formulaic, as I mentioned, meaning it's very standardized. You do not have to provide more information, no less information, just what is requested. And I know this can be confusing, but in the RFA, it's so specific that they will let you know how they want things to be completed. Also, I would say, and this is just sharing my experience, avoid interpreting. Stick to what is requested. Do not interpret, they would think or assume. Understand that 90% of this is automized. When you provide the budget, you also provide it in a form that goes into a system that is going to populate everything for them. So 90% of the numbers that you're giving them is automized. There is no room for them to interpret anything until they read your narrative and they check your budget to see if it is well aligned. Then I would say, in general, in your budget, in the budget narrative, and in your grant, explain yourself within the limits of of the wording that they use. Do not go further into explaining anything else. Structure your cost only in the format or the code that they provide you with, and provide the right information for you to express everything that you need, but also for them to finish their homework. Why? Because, in their mind, they have so many grants and so many programs that they have to do. They will try not to go out of their way in order to interpret something. Okay, next one, please. So the next one is alignment with the grant components, the 5 W's, and all of this refers to the budget, mainly because we're talking about it, but it also refers to your narrative. What are the agency needs? What they really want is quantifying the outcomes that can be reported back to Congress. There is nothing else that they want. They want to say, we're doing our homework, our subcontractor, and the way they spend their money is achieving what you are asking me to do. They are doing my homework, I am doing your homework. These are the outcomes. Right? Each cost has to be directly linked to an outcome according to rules. Make sure that you respond the 5 W's per item if you have a question or a doubt if it is something that is going to be allowable or reasonable. Just going through the 5 W's is very helpful if you're tasked with the budget narrative because it will give you the language that you need. So if there is an item that you don't know, you have to see what do you need from it, who is going to perform it, the timetable, where the allocation, if there is going to be a travel, why, how is it contributing to the final goal. Next one, please. Next one is check, when you're doing your budget, check your goal and your objectives. In this case, for RFA, and we're going back to our example so that we can get more into the mode, The goal is to get CHRs or community health representatives to know what the rules are of this legislation. I have put this as a suggestion. The objective that we want to do under what we're going to do, which is trainings, is create the material for the CHRs first. What is the outcome that we will be looking at? Creating materials allows you to increase availability of information. Then you have another objective that I suggested. Get as many CHRs training, CHRs training as possible. So the outcome is to increase the number of knowledgeable CHRs by 70%, so that they can serve Native Americans in the cities better. The activity that I suggest, and in this case we would be proposing, would be we're going to create a one toolkit and we'll be disseminating through the platform. We'll be creating 2 webinars and 2 trainings, mainly. Every cost has to be connected and justified through your grant application. Next one, please. Okay. So far we have understood, hopefully, what the background is and, the program that we have to comply with so that we're going to do the budget for them. So the typical budget structure is based on a form that you have to submit, which is called the there is an S missing there, I'm sorry, it's SF-424, which is required for all grants. In that one, you can see that we have, if you're able actually to see, we have personnel, fringe benefits, travel, equipment, supplies, contractual, construction, which usually, unless your organization or clinic is doing some construction, you will not use that. I have actually never used it under NICRA. Other means other direct costs that are not one of the above. And then you have a total direct charges. With the direct charges, we're going to take a look at what direct charges are, but that's the line item that we have. And then we have indirect charges. And then we have the total, right? So the direct cost serves mainly your project. That is line A through H. The indirect cost serves you and other projects. That's line J. Now we have one more question. How does your organization calculate indirect cost? That is an important question, and that is something that they always want you to know when you're doing budget preparation. Does your organization have an indirect cost rate agreement? And I will explain what that is. Or a general administrative percentage that they use, or they use the Minimis. What is the difference? So we're going to go through all of this because I know that I'm speaking something that sounds like like alien speak. So next one, please. So let's go through this so that we understand better. What are direct costs? In general, these are the personnel. These are the costs that are going to be completely and directly attached to your program. And that, some of these items or the time may be shared with others, but what you're going to include in your budget is just specific to your program. It is directly connected. The percentage of the personnel that will be spent on the program, the fringe and benefit percentage that will be connected to that personnel, the travel that is needed for the program. Here you cannot include other travel or, you're needing to go somewhere which is justifiable, but not for your program. You cannot include that. It is only needed for the program. Equipment, and we'll go into this equipment for the program because sometimes there are some confusions about what equipment is. Supplies that are specifically needed for your program, contractual, construction if you need, and then other. So those will be the direct costs in general. Next one, please. Okay, so what are indirect costs then? If you think about all of these fixed costs that exist, whether your program is there or not, there is an office space that you have to pay, there is internet, phone, fax, a copier contract, a postage machine, there is an accounting person, an IT network website, payroll costs, other general supplies. So whether your initiative exists or not, these are fixed costs. Cost principles are supposed to guide you in general, but they will not give you all the answers. So, we have to find out as we develop the budget whether your cost that you're including is direct and how it is prorated through the organization. So these are the indirect costs in general. We're going to go a little further into this in a little bit. Next one, please. So, okay, so those are the indirect and direct costs. So what can you include in your budget? What are the cost principles, right, that they are always talking about? Those principles are basically principles that will allow you to see the determination of the cost. And, you know, they're intended to identify circumstances or dictate, they are not there to dictate the extent of the federal government participation in the financing. That's what they are trying to do. The principles are designed to provide you to provide the federal awards. I'm sorry, I'm going to start again. The principles are designed to provide that federal awards bear the right share of the cost, meaning that, you know, what you're including in your budget is going to be consistent with your activities, and you're not going to be putting a lot of burden on the government on something that you're not going to be working on. And also, it will help you determine, you know, if these costs are directly connected or not. So those are the cost principles in general, and I know this sounds very dry as well, so we're going to go into each one specifically. Next one, please. So they're always saying, make sure that your costs are allowable, allocable, and reasonable. What is allowable? You know, in order to have something that is allowable on the federal awards, it has to be necessary, you know, and reasonable. And we'll go into what reasonable is, because this is, again, this is exactly government speak. It has to be allocable. It has to be consistent with the policies and procedures in general of your organization and with the federal government. You know, it can be only put into direct or indirect. You cannot put into both. It has to be part of the generally accepted accounting principles. And also, you know, if you're going to be using them to do some matching with other programs, you cannot do that. You have to be very clear about how you're going to be spending those funds and how they are going to be interacting with other projects. And they have also to be documented. And if you do not know very well how that is allowable, we're going to go further into this, because this is precisely, you know, what is included. And I know it is not very self-explanatory. So we'll go into the next one, please, and then we can make sure that probably you will understand better what it is. What is allocable? You know, that it is incurred specifically for the federal award, as I mentioned. It benefits the federal award and the general entity, it has to be distributed in proportions. You know, that it is necessary for the overall operation, and that you cannot be charged twice, let's say that way. You know, if you're going to be doing charging this grant, you're not going to be charging for the same item to another grant. So that would be like double dipping, they would say. That is what is in general considered allocable. Next one, please. And it has to be reasonable. You know, in nature, the amount, it cannot exceed what it should be exceeding. You know, you have to be prudent and then act in reasonable way in order to express that into the budget. So I'm providing you with a quick guide for all three. And I know that these last three slides have not been very clear. And that is because that is the language that is included in the guidance from OMB, but we're going to go into hopefully something that is easier to understand. Next one, please. Okay, so far before I go into this, and hopefully this will clarify, do we have any questions? Okay. So, so what can I include in my budget again? You know, after all that I read, you know, in case the allowable, allocable, reasonable is not helping you with those definitions, you can try this. This is one of the techniques that I have developed, that is analyzing the operations from the product to the goal outcome. So, you know, you can ask these questions. And what is your final product? What activities need to take place? What tools do you need for the activity? Who is going to perform it? How long it will take? How is your activity connected to your objective? How is that objective connected to your goal? How is your goal connected to your outcome? Let's go to the next one, please. I'm giving you here an example in case you have, in case you're wondering about how to include it in your budget. What is your final product? It will be a toolkit. What activity needs to take place? Research, analysis, design. What topic do you need for the activity? Research software, design software, platform. Who is going to perform it? It will be an assistant, a supervisor, a design consultant. How long will it take? 3 months. How is your activity connected to your objective? It will include the knowledge tools that we need to educate CHRs. How is that objective connected to your goal? It will allow you for CHRs to know how to comply with the new rule. How is your goal connected to the outcome? It will increase the amount of information available for CHRs to get educated. If you have a question, you can go through this. If you have a question about an item, you can go through these questions. It will for sure, if you're able to, fulfill or steal all of this information, that means that it completely aligns with what, with what you're including, because everything is responded, and you know that it's connected from the product to the goal. Next one, please. So the basic budget template, we have, it comes from the S424, and there are 2 ways in which you can do it. If you have a negotiated indirect cost rate agreement, and that is, all of your fixed costs, you talk to the agency, and then the agency is going to provide you with a percentage that you allow them to charge them. If you don't have it, then you would have to include it as part of your direct cost, and that is called the minimis. Next one, please. So let's go back to our program, and I see that we started late, but I see that we don't have a lot of time. So I'm providing you with the full budget that we created. The goal, the RFA goals that we have are on the left. The budget we have is on the right. Then we have, I've seen that we have filled it out. I have put it here for you all together, but this is not the only thing that we're going to do. We're going to go through each one of them very quickly. Next one, please. Okay, so I am providing you with a template. Usually there are 2 ways in which you can do it. You can only put the items and then the amount. I am providing you as part of this as a tool. There is another one that I call the complete one, which is the budget categories. You have notes, rate, units, quantity, and amount. If you have all of those, you will be able to do a budget narrative very easily. Next one, please. So we have here personnel. And then we have decided that we're going to have project director, a program associate, and a program assistant. Just to make sure it is included the rate, the units, and the time. And then you have the amount. So if you are having any questions, what do you need? I need personnel in order to comply with the toolkits or to do the training, etc. Who is to perform? These are the people who are going to be performing, and they will be assigned a task each one. When the timeline, we have 1.5 years. The location is going to be the office or either at the location of the webinars. Why? They are contributing to the final goal. Well, they are going to be the one performing them. Next one, please. Okay, there is an alternative calculation. You can do it by hour, per percentage, or per month. And this is also included in the budget tool that I'm giving you as part of the handout. Next one, please. So I'm trying to go fast so we have some time for questions. Then the fringe. The fringe is basically all the benefits that your company has, and you have to include them. You have to make sure that you are including the benefits that are only going to be benefiting the program and the organization. There is over there an overhead concept that some people include, that is depreciation, and I just want to make you aware that that exists. You don't have to go into that because that is not part of the project. In this case, what would be an unallowed cost? That would be, for instance, an out-of-state tax. Or if your company provides benefits that are not part of the organizational regular thing, like a tennis team benefit, this would not be placed to include that. Next one, please. Okay, for travel, there are very specific travel requirements, and that goes all into the General Services Administration. Here, I'm providing you with how you would have to do it. In this case, we have 1 ticket. They are going to Denver, Colorado. With the lodging, this rate that I included is part of something that the General Services Administration has put as Denver, Colorado. This is the maximum amount that you can charge, and I will provide you with a link for that. The meals and incidentals is also for Colorado, and I have broken it down per day. because that's the way they are asking you to do. The first and the last day have a rate, whereas the days in the middle have a different rate. And all of that is the meals and incidentals or per diem. The travel, the taxis are also, per trip, and then you can include a calculation of those. If you have somebody who's going to be driving, you can calculate the miles. And as I mentioned, with the template that I'm giving you, you can put all of this information and it will populate the results as you know and as you want. When it comes to travel, what would be not allowable? A trip to Disneyland would be not reasonable, but it also could help, maybe a trip to a destination that is not pertinent to the program, that would not be allowable either. Next one, please. I am here providing you with the rate, and if you click on that, then you'll be taken precisely to the per diem, in which they are going to give you the rates. You just have to include the rates as per your trip. Next one, please. Okay, with equipment, I want to mention it has to be $5,000 or more in order to be considered equipment. In the past, computers and laptops were considered equipment, but now they are considered supplies. So you have to make sure that if you ever are going to include an equipment, probably as behavioral health, no, but maybe RX or others for other programs, that would have to be more than $5,000. Otherwise, it is not included there. If it is more than 20 or 25,000, then you have to check with the program officer. But in general, equipment is not something that nonprofits that do not clinical services do usually. Next one, please. Not clinical service, I'm sorry. The next one is office supplies and project supplies. Here I want to say office supplies and project supplies are usually confused. Office supplies will be pens, paper towels, tissues, etc. Your project supplies are laptops, software, desktop, cell phone, special paper, anything that is completely connected to what you're doing. So you have to make sure that you're including the ones that are project supplies. Even if most people put their office supplies, that's because it will be supplies for your office, but it's only connected to the project. Next one, please. So contractual, the Minimis versus NICRA or GNA. As I mentioned, if you don't have a negotiated indirect cost rate agreement, then you would have to include all of your costs within the contractual part or within your direct cost. In this case, in the upper one, you will see everything that is in yellow. Those are fixed costs. That would be part of your indirect costs, but are included in the contractual part as direct because you do not have an agreement with the government on how much you're going to charge. On the second part, you will see that I am only including a subcontract for the CHR association, a consultant to, and another consultant. That is because those are going to be contracts for the project specifically, and I'm not including the fixed costs because then we have a specific rate that we have agreed on with the government that we will charge at the end of our project. We will just add a 20% or 10% depending on what you have negotiated. Next one, please. So ODC is all of other direct costs that that you're haven't included yet. In the contractual part, obviously it has to be a contract. It can be a contract to develop a specific part of the toolkit. It can be a design contract, etc. In this case, other direct costs usually involves costs that are not within the categories above, like for instance, events. In the part that is in yellow, which is the one that does not have a NICRA or an indirect cost rate agreement, then you will see that we have an event and then I have only put that, and the rest is fixed costs that we have to include. In the one below, you will see that the other includes the events, and I have broken down it by venue, AV, visual or any technical assistance that they would need in order for things to comply. This one, the last one, has a indirect cost rate agreement, meaning that in the end you will charge a part or a percentage of the full cost to the program, and that will be the only thing that is needed. Next one, please. Okay, so if we add all of the costs, then you will get your grand total. And then on the one on the left, we are not using an indirect cost rate agreement. So the yellow parts are the ones where you included the fixed costs that you could not include as part of the general administrative or the ICRA, meaning the indirect cost rate agreement. The one on the right, we have some of everything, and then we are doing a 10% in addition, which is our negotiated cost rate agreement with the government, and then you'll get you add it to the budget, and then you get the total. Next one, please. So I just want to provide you with a wrap up on my recommendations. I'm looking forward to the questions, and in case you have, we can spend a little bit more depending on you. You have to make sure that you're consistent 3 times, that everything is mirroring. There is a consistency in alignment, a consistency in how you're allocable, things are allocable, allowable, and reasonable. The wrong assumptions that you can have is thinking that cheaper is better. The government doesn't really care. They just want to pay for what is right. That it is convenient or will save funds for the government, they don't really care about that. They just want to make sure that the cost is right and that it is common sense. They don't have common sense, and they may have a different common sense than you, so those be wrong assumptions. Right assumptions. They do not know anything about your project. They do not care or have a vested interest in your project. They want to comply with what they have to do, and if your project does, then they will be interested. Their logic is different from your logic. Imagine that you're explaining your idea to a 15-year-old, break down every single cost to limits, and express everything that you can. Next one, please. Okay, thank you very much. This is my presentation, and I'm looking forward to the questions. And I mentioned if we have to stay a little longer, I'm happy to do that.
So thank you again, Alejandro, and thank you for everyone who's joining us and being patient and learning through all of these aspects of budget fundamental preparation. So some questions that we had to ask you are what are some best practices that has helped you in successfully preparing for a grant budget that you would like to share that maybe wasn't brought up today in today's conversation? What are some tools that you use to prepare for a grant budget, and or what have been successes in addressing a grant budget in preparation for you in your specific organizations that you feel that would be helpful for other people on the line to know? And also, I want to leave this open and ask if anyone has any questions in regards to Alejandro's Community of Learning webinar. Is there any questions or things you want him to go back and explain, or you had further questions about clarity? We're also open to that as well.
So I see Carrie. Carrie is asking if you can utilize past activity costs. Is that correct?
Yeah, Carrie's asking.
Yes, you can use them actually to inform, and when you're doing your budget narrative, you can say that based on your past activity cost, this is how much it costs, and that will provide some legitimacy to your cost. And unless otherwise required, then you can use it as a justification why you're charging that. Yes.
Yes, if anybody wants to type in any of the questions that they have, and they don't in the chat box to their side, we're also open to that. Just if you don't want to, speak through the phone, just as Carrie just did.
Yes, please.
I'll give it another minute and see if anyone has any other best practices they want to share, or just anything that they want to kind of have a chance to ask Alejandro, since he's
yes, please.
For us. Okay, so if there isn't anything else, I would like to first thank everyone and thank Alejandro again for leading part 3 of our Behavioral Health Community Learning on best practices for grant writing. I want to thank everyone who joined. I want to remind you again that we will be sending invitation details to our Behavioral Health Community Learning on medical assisted treatment. That will be happening on Wednesday, April 3rd from 2 to 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. If anyone knows as well who have any colleagues or new staff in your organization that may benefit from this community learning, please forward your calendar invites that we share with you. I want to also mention that if you have any questions, if you're a NCUIH member organization and need technical assistance from us, if you want to have access to this current recording community learning or prior community learning series portions of this, then we could also share that with you as well. And we will be sending you a PDF of this PowerPoint presentation with resources that Alejandro has provided us, with a brief survey to just get your support, understanding how we could improve future community learnings. And yeah, I wish if no one else has anything else to add, I appreciate your time. We have a minute to spare, so thanks again, and we look forward to seeing an email from us shortly with a survey and a PDF and documents to improve your own organization's capacity from today's community learning. Thank you again, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good night. Bye.
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 Whatever.